How you guys doing today? My name is Hamza Rahman, and today we're going to be talking about the OSHA regulation 29 CFR 1910.132, which is the general personal protective equipment requirements. This is also about understanding employer responsibilities and worker safety in the industry. First, let me give a brief description. OSHA is a division of the U.S. Department of Labor, and it is responsible for ensuring safe and healthful working conditions for employees. The mission for this is to assure safe and healthful working conditions for working men and women by setting and enforcing standards, and also by providing training, outreach, education, and assistance. Under the OSHA law, the employers are responsible for providing a safe workplace for their workers. As you can see, is a picture of OSHA, which stands for Occupational Safety, Health, and Administration. OSHA is not just a safety program. OSHA is not just something to keep everyone safe. OSHA is a standard to make sure that everything is done correctly so that no one gets hurt. And even if someone did worse to get hurt, it would be helpful for them. What is 29 CFR 1910.132? This is a regulation that is a part of OSHA's general industry standards, and it shows how the things that came from it can help people that are in the industry. This covers the requirements of the personal protective equipment that applies generally across industries. This also sets out employer responsibilities and general principles of the personal protective equipment. What are the employer responsibilities? For every employer or every employee, more so employer, there are responsibilities on both parts, and the employer are basically supposed to make sure that their employees are safe, that their employees are sound, and that their employees are not harmed. And the employees are asked to listen and become objective in the responsibilities that the employer might apply. They have to assess the workplace for anything that deals with hazards. They also select and provide the appropriate personal protective equipment in the industry for OSHA providers. They train employees on personal protective equipment use and care, and how they use it and how they care for it. And this helps because this can be a variety of things, from anywhere for the employees that have used the equipment, that need the equipment, that might want to use the equipment for their own protection. And this is something that really helps from the employers. The workers are required to enforce the proper personal protective equipment usage. This is very good because the employers that require the personal protective equipment usage are better off from things like fines, penalties, lawsuits, and being held accountable for anybody that might harm themselves because of something that they did not do right. So that's why the employer responsibilities are very important when it comes to the OSHA regulation 29 CFR 1910.132. The workers also maintain and replace damaged or worn personal protective equipment. Yes, this is very important because when any personal protective equipment is damaged, the employees are all held accountable to let their supervisor know, because there could be anything that could happen that would make any of this wrong, that could make it very bad for anybody. For the hazard assessment, The hazard assessment has a physical, chemical, and even mechanical hazards that all play a very big role in the personal protective equipment in the OSHA regulations. Anybody can deal with any hazard. Anybody has things that are dealing with hazards. And this plays a very good role in the OSHA industry because whenever you are talking about a hazard, it doesn't just have to be in a plant or a company or a warehouse. It can be anywhere. Teachers can have hazards in a classroom. Students can have hazards on a playground. Football players most likely has hazards, and it can even be janitors can have hazards because maybe they might have stepping over a wet floor that they might have mopped but might have forgot when they came back, and it could cause them to fall, and that would be considered a hazard assessment for the supervisor that is on site. Also, hazards are very common in places where there are a lot of people and where there are a lot of things, pointy things, chairs, desks, even light bulbs, even ceiling fans. Anything can happen and you never know. The hazard assessment does require a written certification. The reason why the hazard assessment does require a written certification is because it plays a very big role in whether it has to be stamped by a supervisor, it has to be notified, because anybody can write up a hazard assessment. But if it is not required a written certification, then what is the point of doing the hazard assessment? Because it would not be, it would be like you never did it. Anybody can write it up. So that is why it does require a written certification. OSHA is also very big on selecting the appropriate personal protective equipment. The reason that they are big on selecting the appropriate personal protective equipment is because in order to select the appropriate things, these would need to be based on the identifying hazards. This is talking about how if you were in on a plant site, you wouldn't just want arm sleeves that you think will protect you from any hazard. You will also want to look at where you are working because it could play a different role in what hazard that you need to protect yourself from. Basically, based on if you are working somewhere that has machinery above your head, then most likely you would most likely need a hazard hat, which is a very good thing anywhere. Another thing could be if you are dealing with very heavy and pointed materials, you would probably need hand gloves, steel gloves as a personal protective equipment. And also, if you are working somewhere that is very hot or even very cold, you would, in both situations, you would need to wear a bodysuit that will protect you from anything that can harm your body from extreme heat. You would need steel toe boots that can protect your toes, your feet, and your bones just from anything that could be very bad. The examples of these would be having the gloves, goggles, face shields, hard hats, respirators, etc., etc. In order for the appropriate personal protective equipment to work, it must meet the OSHA standards. And what I mean by that is for them things to work, they must meet standards of that it actually happened and it actually worked for people in the past that may have had hazards or even things that may have happened to them in the future. For the personal protective equipment training requirements, these are required because it shows when to wear the equipment, such like during specific tasks and only in certain environments for certain gear. Like I was saying before, sometimes you may not need a hard hat for something that you would more likely to need steel toe boots for, or you might not need hand gloves, steel gloves for something that you will probably not need a bodysuit for, but et cetera, et cetera. And it plays a very big role because sometimes you might need everything. This shows how to wear the training gear, like how much protection you would need when wearing the gear. It will show you how exactly to put the hard hat on, for example, or it will show you how to wear the exact hand gloves, or how to wear the boots, or how would you even wear the goggles, the glasses that you would need to protect your eyes, or you might need a mask to protect your face. It could be many of things. Employees must understand the boundaries and limitations of the personal protective equipment, like the durability and greatness of it. The reason that I say this is because it plays a very big role in the way that the employees should look at the durability and the greatness of having personal protective equipment, because it can play a very big role in how it affects you personally, and how it would basically change your life when it comes to things like personal protective equipment. Things like this could also be a proper care, maintenance, and the disposal of the equipment. What I mean by proper care, maintenance, and the disposal of the equipment is, how would you take care of the equipment, and how is the maintenance on the equipment, and what about the disposal of the equipment, about how that it would play a role in your life. Another important process in the personal protective equipment, and with that stands within the OSHA regulations, is ensuring the personal protective equipment is used and properly. This is important for the enforcement of policies in the workplace. The reason that this is very important is because it would show that making sure that the personal protective equipment is used would be a very good thing when it comes to the workplace, as if it can cause different things to happen, such like hazards and assessments and everything like that. It would be used for the supervisory responsibilities. Basically, the supervisor should always ensure that the personal protective equipment is used properly, because they are the ones that are on the job, that make sure that their workers get the work done right and are protected. Because if anything were to happen and they did not enforce those things, it could fall badly on them, and that is one thing that they would not want to happen. And this is what happens when a personal protective equipment is not used properly. Basically, if the personal protective equipment is not used properly, then things could happen, like if you didn't have on a hard hat and you had machinery above your head, something can fall on your head, and it could cause you to have a brain injury, or a concussion, or even die. Another reason that it is important to ensure the personal protective equipment is used correctly, because you might be in a place where you try to wear regular shoes, where you don't wear steel toe boots, and something falls on your feet and hurts it very, very bad, and sometimes you may not be able to walk more. Or even if you have gloves that you are supposed to wear, but you don't wear them because you think you're too cool for the job, then that would make it very badly, because maybe your hands could be damaged by some machinery that you are picking up, and that would be the reason why they told you not to disobey the equipment. Also, for the employee rights and responsibilities, the employees will have the rights to training and protection for themselves. What I mean by this is, the employees basically have the right to know what they are supposed to do, and the protection that they are supposed to have for themselves. For example, like if someone were to go on a job and the supervisors tries to start them immediately without no training, without any heads up, without any learning on the protective equipment, then it will cause them to get hurt, and they do have the right to get the correct training and the protection for themselves. The employees would also have the responsibility to follow safety rules reported as followed. The employees would also be required to have the responsibilities to report damaged goods, or even can report the ineffective personal protective equipment that might not be working, but a supervisor might not know. This is very important because when a good is damaged, then and you were not to report it, then it would be a very bad situation that would cause something to be harmed, or that will cause anything on the job to not go right. And the reason why reporting ineffective personal protective equipment to a supervisor is because if they didn't know and you did not report them, then they can't be liable for anything that might happen to you on the job, because technically you did not report. So that is why it's very important to report ineffective personal protective equipment when it comes to a supervisor and the personal protective equipment. In OSHA, there are common violations and penalties, and I'm going to share a few with you. For examples of the common violations, there could be failure to conduct proper hazard assessments. There could be a failure to enforce the wearing of the personal protective equipment. There could be any violations of not providing the proper personal protective equipment. And some of the penalties of this would result in fines and citations from OSHA. For example, it could be if you were in on a job and you did not report any hazards that might have come along. This can result in hundreds of thousands of dollars for the fines. There might be close to $200,000 for the fines for the OSHA penalties, and it could cause you to lose a job, or it can cause you to be reported. It could cause you to be sued or anything. And that is why it is very important to wear the proper personal protective equipment when it comes to the OSHA regulation.